Hey guys, welcome to the vlog. This is a requested video. Someone asked me how to take a manual blood pressure. In the video where I was volunteering at my hospital, that's what we did, manual blood pressure checks. The reason we check blood pressure so consistently is because we want to diagnose hypertension very early. Hypertension is an increase in blood pressure. Textbook blood pressure is a systolic of 120 and a diastolic of 80. So your systolic blood pressure is the top number. When people say 120 over 80, the 120 is a systolic blood pressure, which is the pressure in your heart when it's pumping out blood. Every beat is that systolic blood pressure. The diastolic blood pressure, the lower number, which would be 80 in this example, is the amount of pressure in your arteries after that heartbeat. So heartbeats, systolic pressure, the heart is not beating anymore, the pressure in the arteries is this diastolic blood pressure. So it's like boom, 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 boom. Okay, so that's that. When taking a manual blood pressure, I know we don't do this very often in the hospital or a doctor's office or things like that. Things are automated now. So people kind of forget the little intricacies of the manual blood pressure. The cuff size, very important. You don't want to put a cuff that's too big or too small. You're going to have an inaccurate reading. Patient position is really important. You want the patient sitting up with their back supported. Like my back is not supported on the couch right now. I'm sitting forward. Their back needs to be supported or else their diastolic pressure would be more elevated. The person needs to be sitting with their legs flat on the ground, not their legs crossed. If they do sit with their legs crossed, the diastolic pressure would be elevated. These are just things you need to look out for. When the patient comes in, ask them if they just drank coffee, if they just smoked a cigarette, if they walked or ran there. When you're actually taking the blood pressure, when the cuff is on the patient's arm and you're inflating and going about the process, make sure the patient is not talking because that could also raise the blood pressure. There's these little things you have to pay attention to that when you see a reading, you might have to underestimate or overestimate or, adjust the reading to fit that person's actual pressure. When I do those blood pressure screenings at fairs and volunteering within the community and things like that, I always ask the patient if they regularly check their blood pressure and what that reading usually is. So I have a somewhat understanding of what your baseline is so that I know if my reading is accurate, if I'm way off, if any changes need to be made. I need to know if you're diagnosed with hypertension, if you're taking your medication as prescribed, etc. Alright, that's enough talking, let's get into it. Honestly, when I saw this request, I was like, oh man, where's my manual blood pressure cuff? So I went to go look for it in my storage and I found 3 of them. So I think I'm gonna do a giveaway. I've never done a giveaway before, and I'm gonna give away one of my blood pressure cuff, my sphygmomanometer. No one calls it that. Still in the box. I clearly haven't touched it. It still has all the information package thing and it's still in the plastic. Literally have not touched it. I'm gonna do the giveaway on Instagram, so follow my Instagram handle right there. And yeah, my first giveaway. Let's see how it goes. So depending on the cuff that you buy, it'll look kind of different. This is one of my cuffs. It pretty much comes set up for you. The gauge is here, which is what you're going to measure the pressure on. When you hear the first, I think it's called Korsakoff or whatever, no one used the actual term. When you hear the first beat, that's the systolic blood pressure. When you hear the last beat, that's the diastolic blood pressure, and you would read it based off of this scale, stethoscope, and attach it to this same location, but it's already attached on the cuff for you. This metal thing is already creating a loop for the person's arm. So you would just stretch it out, put the person's arm in here, and then loop it over, and that's where the person's arm would be. That's one kind of cuff. This is another kind of cuff where it does nothing for you. The cuff is already opened and flat like this, so you would have to wrap it around the person's arm and create the hole yourself. It does not come with a stethoscope. You would have to have your own, and you'd have to put it onto the patient separately. Every cuff has these arrows to show you where you want the cuff to be over the artery. This is going to be your brachial artery on your arm. Other than that, the cuffs are not very different. I can attach my gauge to this one just like that, so it looks like the other one. Sometimes if it's an odd position, you have to be a little flexible. That's why I like being able to take off the gauge, and maybe I just place it somewhere, like on a table in front of me, so it's easier to read. All cuffs show you the size on them. This is for just your average adult. You can have one for an obese person, and of course pediatrics. Last thing about the cuff, there's this little inflator thing. I don't know the technical term. It's this like balloon thing where you can tighten, righty-tighty, and you'd squeeze it to inflate the cuff. I don't know if you can tell if it's inflating. Yeah, you can. So typically when this is wrapped around someone's arm, when you inflate it, the gauge will go up. You loosen it, lefty-loosey, and then all the air is able to come out of the cuff, if you can tell. And then the gauge would start going down, and you can start listening for the last sound and then measure the diastolic blood pressure. When you're letting the air out, you don't just loosen it all the way. You sort of, I just tightened it again to show. You kind of just one turn at a time. If you deflate it too quickly, you'll miss the sounds, because this is all auditory. You have to listen for the first sound, systolic, and listen for the last sound, diastolic. If you just open it all the way, the cuff is just going to deflate all the way and you're going to miss all of the sounds. You have to do it pretty gradually. I turn it like once, just like maybe a quarter turn, and I just let it go down on their own. Another thing you don't want to do is keep the cuff on the patient too long. You know what I mean? Because you're constricting all of their vessels in their upper arm. You also don't want to take the blood pressure numerous times on that one arm. Again, you're compressing so many things with this consistent tightening, loosening, tightening, loosening. If you do want to double check the blood pressure, switch to the other arm. Okay, the pressure should be equal.